something that just kind of popped up here. Um, you know, we'll use Tim Corbin as an example because obviously he's an incredible example. He always talked about, the little things, um, and not necessarily baseball wise. Um, I think from a young age, depending on the household you grew up in, we're always taught to like, okay, like clean your room, show up on time, um, do things the first time your parents ask you to do them, tell your parents you love them, all those things that we kind of like take for granted. And all these coaches and parents tell us, like, do these things. And as younger kids, we're like, okay, fine, like whatever, I'll do it, I guess. Um, and it took me a while, playing at Vandy to understand that, doing those things is not just be, don't just do them because someone told me to do them. Um, they're really important, and I guess my question to you is why does taking care of your equipment, why does showing up to the park early, why does getting extra rounds of batting practice, why does putting your glove pocket down on the field so it preserves the pocket, why are those little things so important, especially in baseball?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of answers to that, and there's a quote, and I don't know, I like to say it's my quote, but I don't really think I can take responsibility for it. It came from somewhere else, I'm sure, that you do great things by taking care of all the little things. And if you think about it, it makes sense because you do all the little things on a daily, regular, consistent basis. You do great things once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can master all the little things, the great things will take care of themselves and you'll be successful on a more consistent basis
Mm-hmm.
because you're taking care of all those little things daily.
Right.
And I think that's very important. The and like I, and the other thing about taking care of all the little things and doing the things that you're speaking of is it becomes a habit.
Mm-hmm.
And habits are so important. Doing things like you said, not when you're told, but just doing them. Those are habits.
Mm-hmm.
And your habits are part of your character.
Mm-hmm.
And respect is part of your character. So when you take care of the little things and you have good habits, you have and you have high character and you have high respect, you're going to be someone that will experience success and will help others around you experience success because you will set a standard without the written standards. And that's the whole key to building a culture in a program is getting the standards set to where your more experienced players are teaching the standards to younger players just by the way they behave and act.
Right.
That's kind of what's happened at Vanderbilt over the years. Not that they
Mm-hmm.
were bad kids or bad people or bad players in the early days,
Sure.
because they were great people
Mm-hmm.
um, back then. So, um, taking care of those little things and building good habits is essential in anything that you do
Sure.
in your daily life, in your job, your career. Um, and just having respect, showing respect. I'll tell you a story about it. I'll mention his name too, and I don't know if I should or not, but Mike Baxter.
Yeah.
Mike Baxter is one of the great people I've met
Mm-hmm.
in my 20 years at Vanderbilt, one of the hundreds of great people I've met.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when Bax was playing professional baseball, he would come back and work baseball camp at Vandy.
Mm-hmm. I remember
Um,
that.
yep. And and here's a guy who's a major league baseball player, making some good money on TV, the whole deal. And when we'd end camp at the end of the night, he's sweeping the dugout, he's picking up garbage, he's doing everything everybody else was doing.
Right.
Matter of fact, probably more, leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget it. Corb and I were doing something, cleaning up, and Corb said, "Look at that guy."
Yeah.
And I looked at Corb, and he goes, "He doesn't have to do that."
Yeah.
And I said, "You know what? When you do things that you don't have to do that help others
Right.
and show respect, that's a habit."
Right.
He didn't think about that.
Right.
He just started doing it.
Yeah.
And what a testimony to that guy and his work
Absolutely.
ethic and his character.
Absolutely. And I think I don't um I grew up kind of watching him play, and I've seen him over the years, and that's a perfect example of, doing those little things all the time, and look where he's ended up. Um Incredible hitting coach at an outstanding university, um and just a heck of a guy too. And I'm just I know you and I are both really happy for him and all the success that that program has had. Um, you know, but let's go back to the player's perspective from a younger kid. I mean, it's kind of a blatant answer, but like, why don't people do those things? Why not do it? Like, why is it so difficult? Why
Yeah,
don't
and
people want to do them?
this sounds this could sound a little bit pessimistic, but I think people are inherently lazy.
Sure.
I think people will take the easy road
Mm-hmm.
whenever possible. And that's one of the thing about, the comfort zone thing. Look, it's easier to do it the old way than
Right.
to change and do and so it's environmental from an environmental perspective and a culture perspective, those
Mm-hmm.
things have to be taught.
Sure.
And it's just like learning a foreign language. If you're a young man in a household that speaks Spanish and English, and you
Mm-hmm.
learn both those languages as a kid growing up, it's
Mm-hmm.
a lot easier and it's a lot more inherent. It's
Right.
it's in you a little bit stronger than it is if you try to teach someone Spanish when they're 16 years old.
Right.
And
Right.
and we're trying to teach these things to 16, 17-year-olds
Mm-hmm.
that environmentally it's two clashing worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Coach Corbin talks about recruiting and how he was recruiting a player when he was at Clemson coaching, and he's recruiting a player, and the kid looked over into the stands to his mom and went like this because he wanted a drink, and the mom brought him over a drink. The kid took the drink and then dropped it over the fence, didn't say thank you, didn't. And and Corb said he left the field. He left.
Yeah.
I went back and told Coach Leggett that kid can play.
Yeah.
He's going to play baseball for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Leggett said, "Well, what do you want to offer him?" And Corb said, "Nothing.
Right.
He
Right.
can't play here."
Yeah.
So you got two environments that clash,
Mm-hmm.
and the strongest environment in a kid's life is their home life and their parents.
Yeah.
And whether the parents are good parents, bad parents, there for the kid all the time, never there for the kid, that bond between a child and their parents
Yeah.
and that environment is the strongest environment.
Yeah. And I think if you can, whether that background is good or bad for the kid, um, if you can have a second voice as a coach, and move them in that direction of trying to make them better, uh, you know, making them do the right things, holding them accountable to those things. I think I don't want to say it's more powerful, but it's certainly got some power to it, because you're around your parents all the time, and they're like, do this, do that, and you're like, okay, fine, 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 fine. And then if you've got a coach who cares about those little things, it's like, oh, this is somebody else other than my parents telling me that.
Yeah.
um and and I think that's really powerful, and I think that's a responsibility that we have as coaches, to do that. even if we're, inherently lazy people. I I wouldn't say I'm lazy, but it's hard. I think it's hard for me, just like anybody else, to stay, keep everything neat and tidy. I don't like doing it. And I tell our kids all the time, like, guys, like me and all these other coaches, like we do a million things a day that we don't want to do.
Mhm.
It's not about wanting to do them. It's if you feel like doing them, or you're never going to feel like doing a lot of the things that you do. So the feeling factor is I'm not saying your feelings don't matter. I'm saying that if you want to be successful, you're going to have to do things that contradict your feelings.
Mhm.
Like cleaning the facility over here, or doing taxes, things like that. Don't like it. It's not fun. Um, but you know, we as adults, we have to do those things in order to one, survive and just excel. So if you can get that across to a younger player, even if they don't like it initially, it's really important.
Mhm.
Um, and these are really basic things to adults, but to kids, it may be a whole new world to them. So you kind of have to put your ego aside instead of saying like, why can't this kid do this? Why can't he do this? Why can't they do this? Well, instead of complaining about it, let's teach them. Um, and that's an easy trap for a coach to fall into, is complaining. And I've certainly done my fair share of it to other coaches. We've all done it. But if we can put our ego aside and just say like, listen, let's help little Johnny figure out how to do this instead of just kind of writing him off, so to speak. And that's again another challenge as a coach.
Yeah, and from a coaching perspective, one of my big things through my years as a high school coach, number one is, we didn't recruit kids. We weren't in the recruiting game. That happens in high school from time to time, but that's we're not in that game. And I never recruited any players to my school. Said, hey, come to my school. For a couple reasons. One, it's not the right thing to do at the high school level, and number two, if you recruit somebody, if you talk someone into coming to your school, then you're indebted to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, you told me to come here, so then
Right.
right, so then your standards, then you might have to adjust your standards, right?
Yep.
So, but one reason I felt like I had success as a high school coach and was able to build programs and make teams better and actually have some success against better talented teams and make playoffs and all that kind of stuff was because we focused more on our bottom 50% of talented players than on
Mm-hmm.
our top 50%.
Right.
And not that we were cheating our, but I felt like, look, if our 7, 8, and 9 guy in the batting order can't be productive, we're not going to be successful and win
Right.
high level and beat good teams.
Right.
We need to be as good in our, not as good, but we need to be successful with the bottom half of our batting order.
Yeah.
And so many coaches, it's so much easier to coach those good players on your team than it
100%.
is those not so good players. The not so good players take a lot more effort, a lot more time, and and I think by having that approach, you really build your program up. And not only do you build your program up to make your team better and help those kids, but you also get surprised sometimes because those kids start to push those better kids
Right.
that get a little bit comfortable where they are.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm batting first. You know what? Well, my number 9 batter is really doing well. Maybe we're going to flip flop our 9 and our 1.
Yeah.
And so that motivates those kids to get, to focus in and make sure that they're doing the right things to get better.
Sure.
and I think that's so important when you're working with a team environment.
Mm-hmm.
The kids understand. Look, just because I'm batting third today doesn't mean I'm going to bat third the whole season.
Right. Right.
I got to work. I got to produce. I got to get the job done.
Right.
Just because I'm a senior, doesn't mean I'm going to be a starter. You see so many
Right.
coaches at the high school level that play kids because they're the older kids.
Well, yeah, I mean, I talk about, I've talked to some kids in our program and I'm like, hey, are you, what position are you playing this year? And they said, well, I'm kind of like second string behind this guy. And I'm like, well, is he better? He's like, well, he's a senior. And I'm like, okay, so like, is he better or is because he's older? Um, and I think that may be, the title of a senior or a freshman gets in the way of the actual ability.